I'm at a barbecue. 2 years after I lost the contract that would have changed my career. 2 years after I spent months wondering who made the anonymous call to my employer. 2 years after I told my best friend Paul, my best friend of 20 years, the man who stood next to me at my wedding, that I'd never forgive whoever did it. Paul's wife, Elena, is talking to someone in the kitchen. She doesn't know I'm in the next room. She says, "You never told him about the phone call." It's been 2 years. He still thinks it was a competitor. The person she's talking to says he'll never forgive Paul if he finds out. Elena says that's why Paul hasn't told him. He's waiting for the right time. There is no right time. There's only before you know and after. I don't confront her. I don't walk into the kitchen. I stand there for a full minute. My hands are cold. My face is hot. I think about Paul's toast to my wedding. I've known him longer than anyone. He's the brother I chose. He said that while I was standing 5 feet away. While he already knew he made the call that cost me a contract I'd worked 6 months to land. I walk out the back door. I don't say goodbye. I don't say anything. I just leave. My name is Daniel. I was 38 when I found out about the call, but the story starts 20 years earlier in a dorm hallway. Paul was wearing a band t-shirt I recognized. I said, "Nice shirt." He said, "You know them?" I said, "They're my favorite." We talked for 3 hours. That was it. The kind of friendship that felt inevitable. Like we had been waiting to find each other. He was at my father's funeral. I was at his. He loaned me money when I was broke, and I paid him back late, and he never mentioned it. I drove him to the hospital at 3 a.m. when his daughter was being born. We had a history that felt unbreakable. That's what I thought. The contract came 6 months before the call. 6 months of work. A client that would have double my revenue. I told Paul about it. Of course I did. He was my best friend. I told him everything. The pitch. The negotiations. The likelihood I would win. The sleepless nights before the final presentation. I said, "This is the one. This changes everything." He said, "You deserve it." His voice was normal. His face was normal. I didn't see anything. I never saw anything. That's what I keep coming back to. Not what he did. Why I didn't see. The blankness. The ease of his lie. The way he said, "You deserve it," like he meant it. Like he hadn't already decided to make sure I didn't get it. The call came on a Tuesday. My employer said, "We receive an anonymous complaint about your work. We're putting the contract on hold pending review." I asked what the complaint was. They wouldn't say. I asked who made it. They wouldn't say. I spent months trying to figure out. A competitor? A disgruntled former client? Someone I had wronged without knowing? I made lists. I replayed conversations. I lost sleep. I lost confidence. I lost the contract. 6 months of work. Gone. Because someone picked up a phone and said something that wasn't true. Or maybe it was true. I never found out. Because they wouldn't tell me. And I never considered Paul. Not once. That's what haunts me. Not that he did it. That he was so far outside the realm of possibility that I didn't even think to check. 20 years of friendship. 20 years of dinners and holidays and late-night phone calls. 20 years of thinking I knew who he was. And he was capable of this. And I had no idea. That's the betrayal that keeps giving. Not the lost contract. The lost certainty. The knowledge that I had been standing next to someone who was aiming at me, and I never felt a thing. Elena said something at my wedding. I didn't think about it then. She said, "You and Paul, it's like your brothers. He'd do anything for you." She was right. He would do anything, including things I wouldn't have imagined, including things that would break me if I knew, including standing at my wedding, giving a toast, hugging my mother, and never once mentioning the phone call that cost me everything. That's a before time. The time when I still believed that 20 years meant something. That loyalty was real. That the people closest to you were the safest. I was wrong. I just didn't know it yet. The review took 3 months. I didn't work during those months. I couldn't. I was under investigation. My reputation was in question. The client waited. Then they didn't. They signed with someone else. Someone who hadn't been accused of something anonymous and vague. I sat in my home office and refreshed my email and watched the opportunity drain away. 3 months of silence. 3 months of not knowing who had called or what they had said. 3 months of wondering if I had done something wrong without knowing it. I hadn't, but I didn't know that then. I just knew I was losing something I had worked 6 months to build. I told Paul about the investigation. Of course I did. He was my best friend. I said someone made an anonymous call. I don't know who. I don't know why. He said, "That's terrible." His face was concerned. His voice was sympathetic. He asked if I had enemies. I said, "I don't think so." He said, "Someone must have it out for you." I said, "I guess so." I never looked at his face and wondered. Not once. I said, "I don't understand why someone would do this. I haven't hurt anyone." Paul said, "Some people are just jealous." I said, "Jealous of what?" "I haven't even won the contract yet." He said, "Jealous of the possibility. Some people can't stand to see someone else about to succeed." I said, "That's pathetic." He said, "Yes, it is." He looked at me when he said it. He didn't look away. That's the part one don't understand. How do you look at someone's face and lie like that? How do you hold eye contact while pretending to comfort them over something you did? I don't know. I'll never know. I don't want to know. But I think about it. Late at night, when I can't sleep, I think about his eyes. How steady they were. How he didn't flinch. How he said, "Yes, it is." Like he was on my side. Like he was outraged on my behalf. Like he hadn't been the one to make the call. That's the part that breaks something in me. Not the lost contract. The ease of his deception. The way he wore his loyalty like a mask, and I never saw the seam. The contract died. I stopped talking about it. I moved on. Other work came. Not as good. Not as big. But enough. I told myself it was a fluke. A bad break. Something that happened to people who were about to succeed. I didn't know it was something that happened because my best friend picked up the phone. That's the not knowing. It protected me. For 2 years, it protected me. I didn't have to grieve the loss of a friendship I thought was unbreakable. I didn't have to look at Paul and see an enemy. I didn't have to wonder if 20 years meant anything. I just thought I had been unlucky. And then I heard Elena's voice in the kitchen, and the not knowing ended, and the grief began. Not for the contract. For the 20 years I had spent trusting someone who was capable of this. For the wedding where he stood next to me. For the toast he gave. For the brother I thought I had. That's the grief. That's the loss that keeps giving. Not the money. The trust. The certainty. The belief that the people closest to you are the safest. I was wrong. And I didn't know I was wrong until I overheard a question I was never supposed to hear. In a kitchen. At a barbecue. 2 years too late. My wedding. 6 months after the contract died. Paul was my best man. He gave a toast. He said, "I've known him for 20 years. He's the brother I chose." People cried. I almost cried. Nora looked at me. She didn't cry. She was watching Paul. I didn't notice then. I notice now. The way her eyes stayed on his face a little too long. The way she didn't smile when everyone else smiled. The way she held my hand tighter than usual when Paul raised his glass. I thought she was emotional. She was paying attention. She was seeing something I refused to see. Paul danced with my mother. He hugged my father. He stayed until the end. He helped clean up. He was perfect. He was the best friend everyone wants. He was also the person who made an anonymous call that cost me a contract. Both things are true. I have to hold both things in my head at the same time. It's like holding two magnets that want to repel. They don't fit. They shouldn't fit. But they do. He was kind. He was cruel. He was loyal. He was a liar. He loved me. He hurt me. The same hands that helped clean up after my wedding picked up the phone and ended something I had worked 6 months to build. I don't know how to hold those two things together. But I have to, because they're both true. At the wedding, Paul pulled me aside. We were near the bar. Everyone was dancing. He said, "You okay? You seem distracted." I said, "I'm fine. Just thinking about that contract. The one I lost." He said, "Let it go. You have better things ahead." I said, "I know. I'm trying." He said, "I'm proud of you. For moving on. For not letting it destroy you." I said, "Thanks. That means a lot." I meant it. He was my best friend. His approval meant everything. Now I know he was proud of me for getting over something he caused. That's not comfort. That's gloating disguised as care. He wanted me to move on so he wouldn't have to watch me suffer over something he did. He wanted me to be okay, so he could feel okay. That's not friendship. That's management. Of my grief. Of my suspicion. Of the story he needed me to believe so he wouldn't have to confess. Nora asked me after the wedding, "Do you trust Paul completely?" I said, "With my life." She said, "Okay. Just okay." I asked why. She said, "No reason. Just checking." I didn't push. I should have pushed. She saw something. I didn't, but I wasn't ready to see. And she knew that. So she stayed quiet. I don't blame her. I blame myself for not wanting to know. For not asking the question that would have saved me 2 years of believing a lie. For not being curious enough to wonder why my wife was watching my best friend instead of crying at his toast. She saw. She knew. She didn't tell me because she thought I wasn't ready. She was right. I wasn't ready. I'm still not ready. But I know now. And knowing is worse than not knowing. But it's also better. Because not knowing was a lie I was telling myself. And I'm done lying. Even to myself. Even about Paul. Even about 20 years of friendship that ended with a phone call I still don't know the contents of. I don't know what he said. I don't know why he did it. I only know that he did it. And that he stood next to me at my wedding. And that Nora watched his face and saw something I refused to see. That's the part that breaks me. Not the betrayal. The blindness. My blindness. I didn't want to know. So I didn't. And I lost 2 years I could have spent grieving something real instead of pretending everything was fine. I'm not pretending anymore. But I'm not sure what comes next. 2 years passed. Normal years. Friendship continued. Paul and I talked weekly. Saw each other monthly. Our families celebrated holidays together. He was still my best friend. I still trusted him. That's the part that breaks something in me when I think about it. I trusted him for 2 years after he made the call. I trusted him at my wedding. I trusted him when he held my daughter. I trusted him when he helped me move. I trusted him through all of it. And he let me. He watched me trust him. He accepted my trust. He never once said, "You shouldn't trust me." He never once said, "There's something you need to know." He just let me believe he was the person I thought he was. While knowing he wasn't. The lie wasn't just the call. The lie was the 2 years of silence after. Every conversation. Every laugh. Every "I love you, man." All of it was true for me. None of it was true for him. Or maybe some of it was. Maybe he really did love me. Maybe he really was my friend. Maybe he was also someone who couldn't stand to see me succeed more than he had. People are complicated. That's not comfort. That's just description. It doesn't help me sleep at night. It doesn't explain how someone can hold your daughter and lie to your face in the same afternoon. It doesn't make the 2 years of trust feel like anything other than a performance I didn't know I was in. I think about what I would say if I could go back. Did you ever think about telling me? Did you practice what you'd say when I found out? Did you think I'd never find out? Did you think I'd forgive you because we're friends? I don't know the answers. I'll never know, because I'm not going to ask. Asking would mean talking to him, and I'm not ready to talk to him. I may never be ready. Some questions don't need answers. Some answers just make the pain more precise. And I already have enough precision. I know what he did. I know when he did it. I know he let me stand next to him at my wedding and never said a word. I don't need to know why. The why won't fix anything. The why is just another room in the house of his betrayal. I don't want to go inside. I started to suspect something was off. Not about the call. About Paul. Small things. He seemed less enthusiastic about my successes. He changed the subject when I talked about work. He made comments about people who get too big for their friends. I thought he was going through something. I asked if he was okay. He said, "Fine. I'll let it go." I should have pushed, but I didn't want to know. Not knowing was easier. Not knowing let me keep my best friend. Not knowing let me believe the world made sense. Not knowing was a drug, and I was addicted. I chose ignorance. I chose comfort. I chose a story where my best friend loved me and the anonymous call was just bad luck. I chose wrong, but I didn't know that then. I just knew I wanted to stop hurting. So I stopped looking, and Paul let me. That's the part one can't forgive. Not the call, the letting me stop looking, the letting me believe. The 2 years of watching me trust him while he knew the truth. That's not friendship. That's not love. That's something else. Something I don't have a word for. Something I'm still trying to understand. Something that might not be understandable. Some things just are. This is one of them. Paul made a call. Paul lied. Paul, let me believe. Those are the facts. I don't need to understand them. I just need to live with them. And I'm trying. Every day. I'm trying. The barbecue. Paul's house. Summer. I was in the living room. Elena was in the kitchen. She didn't know I could hear her. She said, "You never told him about the phone call. It's been 2 years. He still thinks it was a competitor." The person she was talking to, I couldn't see who, said he'll never forgive Paul if he finds out. Elena said, "That's why Paul hasn't told him. He's waiting for the right time." There is no right time. There's only before you know and after. I didn't confront her. I didn't walk into the kitchen. I stood in the living room. My hands were cold. My face was hot. I thought about Paul's toast at my wedding. He's the brother I chose. I thought about the 2 years of silence, the lies by omission, the comfort he had offered while I grieved a contract he had killed. I thought about the fact that he was at my wedding. He held my wife's hand when she walked down the aisle. He hugged my mother. He was in the family photos. And all of it was a performance. I walked out the back door. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything. I just left. I sat in my car for 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat. My phone was in my hand. I could call Paul. I could ask. I could hear his voice. I could listen to him lie or listen to him confess. I didn't do any of it. I put the phone down. I started the car. I drove home. Nora was home when I got there. She took one look at my face. She said, "You know," not a question, a statement. I said, "You knew." She said, "I suspected. I didn't know for sure." I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "Because you wouldn't have believed me. And because I wasn't sure. And because I thought maybe I was wrong." I said, "You weren't wrong." She said, "I know. I can see it on your face." I said, "Paul made the call. The anonymous call. He cost me the contract." Then he stood at my wedding and gave a toast. Nora said, "I know." I said, "How long have you known?" She said, "Elena told me. A year ago." She was drunk. She made me promise not to say anything. I said, "And you kept the promise." Nora said, "I kept it to protect you. Because I knew this moment would come. And I wanted you to hear it from him. Not from me." I said, "I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from Elena. In the kitchen. While Paul was grilling burgers." Nora started crying. I didn't. I just sat there. The betrayal was so large, I couldn't feel it yet. It was like looking at something too bright. My eyes were adjusting. It was going to hurt when they did. I sat on the couch. Nora cried. I didn't comfort her. I didn't have anything left. I thought about Elena's voice in the kitchen. The casualness of it. You never told him about the phone call. Like it was a forgotten errand. Like it was a library book he had forgotten to return. Not a betrayal. Not a lie. Just an oversight. Something that needed to be corrected when the time was right. The time was never going to be right. Paul knew that. That's why he never told me. He was waiting for a moment that would never come. A moment where I would be so happy, so secure, so successful that the news of his betrayal wouldn't hurt. That moment doesn't exist. There is no amount of success that cushions the blow of finding out your best friend sabotaged you. There is no joy that makes that knowledge bearable. There's just before and after. I was in after now, and after felt like nothing. Like the world had been drained of color. Like I was watching my life from outside my body. Like the person who had been my best friend for 20 years was a stranger I had never met. That was the part one couldn't wrap my head around. I had known him for 20 years. 20 years of dinners and holidays and late-night phone calls. 20 years of thinking I knew who he was. And I didn't know this. I didn't know he was capable of this. That wasn't just a betrayal. That was an indictment of my ability to judge character. Of my ability to know who I was standing next to. Of my ability to trust my own instincts. Paul had broken something in me. Not just my trust in him. My trust in myself. And I didn't know how to fix that. I didn't know if it could be fixed. I just sat there, on the couch, while my wife cried, and I waited for the pain to arrive. It was coming. I could feel it at the edges. I just wasn't ready to let it in yet. So I sat, and I waited, and I thought about Paul grilling burgers while his wife told someone in the kitchen that he had never told me the truth. The burgers were probably burning by now. I didn't care. I didn't care about anything except the cold in my hands and the heat in my face and the 20 years of friendship that had just turned to ash in my mouth. I didn't know what came next. I just knew I couldn't go back. To the barbecue. To the friendship. To the person I was before I heard Elena's voice in the kitchen. That person was gone. I was someone else now. Someone who knew. And knowing was a weight I was going to have to carry for the rest of my life. I wasn't ready, but I didn't have a choice. The truth doesn't ask if you're ready. It just arrives, and you have to find a way to live with it. I was going to try. I just didn't know how yet. Paul called the next day. I didn't answer. He texted, "You left early. Everything okay?" I didn't respond. Elena called. I answered. She said, "You heard me. In the kitchen." I said, "Yes." She said, "Paul doesn't know you know." I said, "I know." She said, "He's sorry." I said, "He's had 2 years to be sorry. He let me stand next to him at my wedding. He let me call him my best friend. He's not sorry. He's scared." She said he was jealous. Of the contract. Of your success. I said, "Jealousy doesn't make you pick up the phone. Jealousy doesn't make you watch someone grieve something you destroyed and say nothing." Elena said, "I'm not defending him." I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" She said, "Because I was scared of losing him. And I thought if you found out, you'd never speak to either of us again." I said, "You were right about the second part." I hung up. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed and replayed 20 years of friendship. I didn't know which moments were real. I didn't know if any of them were. That was the worst part. Not knowing where the real Paul ended and the fake one began. Paul loved me. Paul hurt me. Both things were true. I didn't know how to hold them together. I just lay there, waiting for morning. Nothing came. I had to make my own sense. I just didn't know how yet. Paul showed up at my house 3 days after the barbecue. He didn't call first. He just came. Nora let him in. She didn't tell me he was there. She wanted me to see him. She wanted this to happen. Paul was in my living room. He wasn't smiling. He knew I knew. He said, "Elena told me you heard her." I said, "Yes." He said, "I've been wanting to tell you." I said, "For 2 years. You've had 2 years. You didn't. You let me stand next to you at my wedding. You gave a toast. You said I was the brother you chose." He said, "I meant that." I said, "You meant it? You meant it while you were lying? You meant it while you were pretending to comfort me about something you did? What kind of meaning is that?" He said, "I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out for 2 years." I said, "You've been trying to figure it out?" "I've been living my life, trusting you, loving you, thinking you were the person I could count on, and you were the person who picked up the phone." He said, "I was jealous." I said, "I know. Elena told me." He said, "I was jealous of the contract, of your success, of the way things were going for you when they weren't going for me." I said, "So you destroyed it. You made an anonymous call, like a coward." He said, "Yes." I said, "Say it. Say what you did." He said, "I made an anonymous call to your employer. I cost you the contract." I said, "Say the rest." He said, "I watched you grieve it. I comforted you. I lied to your face. For 2 years." I said, "And at my wedding? What were you thinking at my wedding?" He said, "I was thinking that I didn't deserve to be there." I said, "You were right. You didn't deserve to be there. You didn't deserve to hold my wife's hand. You didn't deserve to hug my mother. You didn't deserve to be in my family photos. You stole that. You stole those memories. Because now when I look at them, I'll see you, and I'll know." He said, "I'm sorry." I said, "Sorry is for spilling coffee. Sorry is for being late. Sorry isn't for 2 years of lying while your best friend trusted you with everything. Sorry isn't enough." He said, "What would be enough?" I said, "I don't know. I don't think anything is enough. I think you broke something that can't be fixed. And I think you knew you were breaking it when you picked up the phone. You just didn't care. Or you cared more about your jealousy than you cared about me." He didn't answer. He didn't have an answer. There was no answer. I said, "I want you to leave." He said, "Can we?" I said, "No. We can't. Not now. Maybe not ever. I don't know. But right now, I need you to leave." He stood up. He walked to the door. He looked back. I didn't look at him. I looked at the wall. I heard the door close. Nora came into the room. She sat next to me. She didn't say anything. She just sat. That was the end of the conversation. Not forgiveness. Not resolution. Just a door closing. I didn't call Paul. He didn't call me. The silence was loud. 20 years of weekly calls. Now nothing. The silence was a sound I didn't know existed. It was the sound of a friendship dying. I looked at my wedding photos. Paul was in them, standing next to me, smiling. I looked at his face. I tried to see the lie. I couldn't. He looked happy. He looked like my best friend. Maybe he was both. The best friend and the betrayer. The same person. I didn't know how to hold that. I asked Nora, "Do you think he loved me?" She said yes. I said, "How can you love someone and do that to them?" She said, "People are complicated. You can love someone and still hurt them. You can love someone and still be jealous. You can love someone and still make terrible choices." I said, "That's not love. That's something else." She said, "Maybe, but he thought it was love. That's what makes it sad." I said, "I don't know who I am without him." She said, "You're you. The same person you've always been. He was just there. He wasn't you." Elena called. She said, "Paul isn't doing well." I said, "That's not my problem." She said, "I know. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm just telling you." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because you were his best friend. And even after everything, I think you'd want to know." I said, "I don't want to know. I want to forget he exists. But I can't. He's in my wedding photos. He's in 20 years of my life. I can't cut him out. I can only stop adding new ones." Elena said, "I'm sorry." I said, "Me too." I hung up. I didn't call Paul. I just sat with the silence. It was getting less loud, or I was getting used to it. I didn't know which was worse. A year after the barbecue, my wedding anniversary, Nora and I were looking at photos. The ones from the wedding. Paul was in them. I didn't look away. I didn't cover his face. I just looked. He was there. He was there. He was my best friend. He was also the person who made the call. Both things were true. I didn't have to reconcile them. I just had to live with them. I wrote Paul a letter. I didn't send it. I wrote it for me. It said, "I don't forgive you. I don't know if I ever will. But I'm tired of being angry. The anger doesn't hurt you. It hurts me. So I'm putting it down. Not because you deserve peace. Because I do. I'm not going to call you. I'm not going to see you. We're not friends anymore. We're people who used to be friends. That's sad. But it's not the end of the world. I hope you're okay. I hope you've learned something. But I don't need to know. I just need to walk away. Goodbye." I read the letter to Nora. She said, "Are you going to send it?" I said, "No." She said, "Why not?" I said, "Because sending it would be asking for a response. And I don't need his response. I just needed to say it. Now I've said it, even if he never hears it." Nora said, "That's healthy." I said, "It's not healthy. It's just survival. There's a difference." She nodded. She knew the difference. She had been watching me survive for a year. I put the letter in a drawer. The same drawer where I kept my wedding photos. The same drawer where I kept 20 years of memories. I closed the drawer. I didn't lock it. I just closed it. The story didn't end with reconciliation. It didn't end with forgiveness. It ended with a drawer. A letter. A wife who sat next to me while I grieved someone who was still alive. The silence didn't end with a phone call. It ended with me choosing not to make one. Not out of anger. Out of acceptance. He was my best friend. He betrayed me. He was at my wedding. Both things were true. I didn't have to understand how. I just had to live in the aftermath. And the aftermath was this. I was okay. Not great. Not healed. But okay. Paul didn't get to take my memories. He only got to be in them. That was where he lived now. In the past. In a drawer. In a letter I would never send. That was where the silence ended. Not with a confrontation. With a closed drawer. A wedding photo. And a man who finally stopped asking why and started accepting what was. He was my best friend. He made the call. That was the story. I didn't need to understand it. I just needed to live past it. And I'm over it where silence ends. Have you ever lost a friendship you thought would last forever and realized you were the only one who didn't see it coming? Tell me about it in the comments.